I'm Gabe Lullo, and welcome to the Do Hard Things podcast. We're talking to go-to-market leaders and entrepreneurs who have conquered the challenges, the hustle, and the grind. Get ready for real talk, real insights, and no fluff.
But the hardest thing in the world right now is not actually closing deals, it's actually getting somebody's attention.
If you don't have that hook in that first 5 to 10 seconds, guess what? They're going to scroll to the next one.
You need to go in and you need to make it sound like yourself. That's the biggest piece of the puzzle. And I promise you, we can all tell.
The people that are trolls and the people that are haters never done the thing that you're doing.
I love doing this podcast because I get a front row seat to some of the greatest minds in sales.
Gone are the days of saying stay in your lane. When you're an executive leader and you're an enterprise-wide leader, there are no lanes. You've got to be partners.
Curiosity is like when the type of questions you ask is sometimes the value that you bring.
I need you to tell me when you're ready to buy or what you're ready to do. And I think it's changed so much into like adding more value. And if you're not doing that, then you're definitely going to come off as desperate.
High pressure selling is like a dinosaur tactic at this point.
No parent is like, oh, you should be a salesperson when you grow up, right? Everyone's like a doctor, lawyer, whatever crap. It's never salespeople.
It's not your job to motivate people. It's your job to find motivated people.
It's not cockiness. It's not arrogance. It's confidence knowing I know this and I know that I can help you.
From where I started to where I am today is all because I learned how to sell.
And there's too many people who have only been doing this for 5 freaking minutes. Sit down, close your mouth, actually go out there and get yourself beat up, then come back and tell me if something is dead or not.
That is exactly why I started this podcast, because right there, that's the epitome of doing hard things.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Do Hard Things podcast. I'm your host, Gabe Lullo. I am pumped to be introducing our guest today. Jeff is the COO of PhoneExa, and Mr. Schaffer drives new initiatives and expands brand awareness for an all-in-one marketing automation solution: calls, leads, clicks, emails, SMS, accounting, and a lot more. Jeff is actually a seasoned professional. He's a successful partner of ours. He's been an executive for over 22 years in business management, sales development, digital marketing, and his diverse background has allowed him to lead this company in multiple roles as well in financial services, insurance, e-commerce, and now he's with PhoneExa. We're really excited to learn about that product and what he's been able to do to shape the company. So, Jeff, welcome to the podcast, man. How you doing?
Wonderful. Thanks for having me, Gabe.
Absolutely. Well, the pleasure's ours. We're excited about getting into this. I always like to start, this is the podcast, as you know, is Do Hard Things. And it's not easy to just, go through a 22-year career in sales and business development, right? But now you are at the pinnacle. You're a COO. Walk me through your origin story, man. How'd you get here?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a less conventional path than a lot of my peers and colleagues have taken. When I was a teenager, when I was 13, my mom got diagnosed with terminal brain cancer and given only about 6 months to live. Beat it multiple times, but I found myself in a position where I needed to help her and my younger brothers, and I ended up getting my first full-time sales job at 16 in retail sales. And was making enough to start helping my family. I was selling refrigerators and kitchen cabinets. And by the time I got to just before I was 19, I had gotten really tired of being asked if I was the store owner's son. And I found myself, although I was doing well, I found myself in an interesting position where I was closing high ticket, at the time, what I thought were high ticket orders and such over the phone. And then somebody would come to the store and they'd be shocked that this young kid, with his second suit was the person that they were talking to. And I got the idea that I really needed to be in telemarketing, working over the phone, where my age didn't matter so much. So I got my first telemarketing job at 19 doing B2B IT sales. Had my first 6-figure year at 21, back when 6 figures meant something. Bought my first property then. And I remained in that role for close to 7 years while, and this is a bit of a hat tip to the Do Hard Things title here, while doing second sales jobs in the evenings. And I always seemed to be in the wrong place, wrong time. I got into doing mortgage origination right as the market was crashing. I got into selling and being involved in the sales process of alternative investments right as the market crashed shortly thereafter. And then eventually, um, right around the time of 2006 or so, as the market was crashing, I ended up in a sales role for a law firm that was able to benefit from some of that market crashing. And I was still just a salesperson, right? I was about 25, 26 at this point. Had just bought my first, actual house out in the suburbs. Thought I was settling down at 25, and then got frustrated because I found myself always just being the sales guy. I had no idea where my leads came from. I had no idea how to generate leads and do marketing, and I started to teach myself. Um, Maybe borrowed a tip or a trick that I picked up on from the folks that did the marketing at this firm, but eventually started to teach myself a bit about lead generation and how to generate consumer initiated inbound calls. And I had a buddy, architect and engineer guy, and he called me up one day, tried doing some business consulting for different friends, and he said, "Hey, I've got this friend that uh, is an insurance agent." I didn't know anything about insurance, but he said, "Do you have any marketing ideas?" And I just, on a whim, I said, "Yeah, go set up an account with this vendor, try that, et cetera, et cetera." And he called me up about 6 weeks later, and he said, "She's selling 5 auto insurance policies a day from my living room." And my first response to that, knowing nothing about insurance, was, "Well, is that a lot?" And apparently it was a lot. So we got the idea to go ahead and start an insurance agency. I left my job. We found out very quickly that we were a lot better at generating leads for insurance agents and actually being insurance agents ourselves, and ended up taking what started as a 5-person auto insurance independent agency in California, what ended up, fast forward 2 years later, turning into a large live transfer lead generation company with about 1,300 insurance agency clients around the country, a couple big carriers, names you would know, supplying their big corporate call centers and a lot of retail agencies with live transfer leads. So we got really big, really fast. It was really a wild ride, going from, net zero to about 80 employees, half of which were at our LA HQ, another half around the country. But some changes to telemarketing laws and legislation caused that company to have to go away pretty quickly, at which point I pivoted into the life and annuity space and ended up heading up marketing for a handful of years, about 5 years, for a large life and annuity IMO, and eventually found myself finally, for the first time, kind of at the right place, right time, just by accident. My old partner had reached out to me, the one I ran the lead gen company with, and he said, "I started this little e-commerce agency." And said to him, of course, "What do I know about e-commerce?" At the time, I said, "I started this e-commerce agency. I want to work together again. Can you come back?" 1 year later, COVID hit. And so we went from just being, any old agency in a normal market that's going up, to being at the forefront of helping companies that were transitioning from brick and mortar distribution of their products to having to go through full digital transformation. So we, in a couple year period, tripled revenues and doubled our headcount at that agency. And that all eventually led me to Finexa. I'd kind of historically been the guy who figured out how to make systems that aren't supposed to talk to each other to implement best practices as pertains to sales, marketing, and business ops. And when I found Finexa and I saw this for a all-in-one, all-inclusive suite of performance marketing solutions, it really spoke to me, having come from a place of making disparate systems talk to each other to get some synergy to the point of 1 + 1 = 3 kind of thing. So that really spoke to me, and it's been about 3 years since I joined the team here. Couldn't be happier.
That's awesome. What a story, man. What a ride. Thank you for taking me through that. It's incredible. So, I mean, let's talk about Phonexa, right? You mentioned high level what it is, but obviously product development, user experience. I'm assuming those are the things that come up to you. To walk me through, or just so our listeners know what Phonexa does, and then we can get more into the nuances of your role.
Absolutely. So we cater to a couple different flavors of clientele, but the commonality that they have is they, for the most part, tend to be involved in industries that deal with high volume business to consumer lead and call generation. So think of insurance, financial services, home services, solar, anywhere you can picture a high volume of consumers filling out a form or picking up a phone. We're there and we're powering a part of that experience. So one archetype of our client base would be the actual brand. So this is the end service provider of the product or service, insurance company, big solar company, generally a company that's doing a combination of their own marketing, but and also buying third-party leads and calls from lead and call vendors. The majority of our clients, though, would be the big ecosystem of lead generators, affiliates, publishers, networks, et cetera, that cater to that first tranche. So we're born out of the performance marketing space, and we've created a suite of solutions that's a bit unique in the space in that we have a lot of partial competitors, companies that may have solutions for just web lead tracking and distribution or just call tracking and distribution. We built a suite of 8 complementary products for leads, calls, click tracking, even accounting for those that are trying to automate the invoicing to their lead buyers and automate payouts to their lead sellers. And so we've created this sort of all-inclusive performance marketing suite that touches every part of the consumer journey.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's a lot, and it means that's a good thing because a lot of companies are coming to this realization that they need to have an all-in-one solution, right? We're looking at companies like ZoomInfo and Gong and others that started off in a specific niche and now are rolling out platforms that are more all-in-one. HubSpot has been trying to do it for quite some time, obviously having tremendous success. So I'm assuming that all-in-one inclusiveness is something that you're hearing in the marketplace. It's pretty fragmented, right? A lot of companies are using a lot of different types of tools. Why is it better to have something where it's all in one?
Yeah, and 100% that is feedback we hear from the space and just a fact that we know, but the origin story is a bit more interesting. We actually eat our own cooking. So Finexa was built initially as an in-house tool for one of our sister companies, which is the US's largest affiliate network in a very specific financial services vertical. So we didn't just one day say we want to go ahead and create an all-in-one suite. This came as a result of being uh, sort of going through a trial by fire and building out these various components that we battle tested ourselves for our sister company. And then about 8 years ago, spun Finexa off into its own entity to provide it to the rest of the performance marketing industry.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's funny, like how companies start, right? It's like, oh yeah, we just did this because we needed it for ourselves. And
Right.
then all of a sudden, it's a multi-million dollar business. So you were mentioning, customer feedback and hearing, hey, we didn't expect to go into this, and this. We just did it for ourselves. But how is, client customer feedback so important to the shaping of the product and the platform?
Well, you have to talk to your customers, right? And you have to create an environment where you not only encourage your customers to provide you with feedback, but you have internal processes to be able to take that feedback and transform it into actual actionable changes, right? And especially when you have as many, although they're all in one suite, as many different offerings as we do, you may have one particular set of customers that are comparing you to one particular set of competitors and other solution providers, and others that are looking at how you stack up versus a completely different, unrelated set of solution providers. And then you're going to have feedback coming from all angles, right? You're going to have feedback for your basic marketing KPIs, seeing who's engaging with certain content. You're going to have feedback coming from your front of line sales team, whether you're talking about SDRs or actual AEs that are managing client relationships, all the way through to your onboarding, customer success, customer support, whatever the title is at a given organization. that's actually in the weeds helping customers to implement your solutions. And you have to be able to create an environment that's able to take all of that feedback, funnel it up into the appropriate parts of the org, whatever your structure looks like, and do it in such a way that you're able to turn that into change when needed, right? And to make the decisions. You can't be all things to all people, right? And we have learned that and seen that, especially when you have as many different offerings as we do, right? You want to make sure that where you're focusing your resources, be it developer resources, marketing resources, et cetera, is where you're going to end up delivering the most value to the most clients.
Right. Well, it's funny because to your point, there's if we have so many different product lines or so many different features, it's hard, right? It gets confusing, and we all know confused people buy nothing, right? And so how do you do that, right? How do you say, "Hey, listen, you gotta talk to us." Is it a main feature that you essentially use to lure them in? Or is your approach, "We do everything for everyone, and this is our, initial conversation, our message is we do it all." How do you differentiate between that?
It's a great question. And the go-to-market strategy when you do one thing is a lot less complex to solve for than the go-to-market strategy when you do a ton of different things, right?
Yeah.
And I would say just, from our own trial and error, our own experiences over the years, the first thing is really being able to hammer out, document what the various buyer personas you cater to are, right? Not just speaking in hyperbole and talking about, oh, here's this buyer persona A, buyer persona B, but understanding that these people may speak vastly different languages. So the director of performance marketing at a pay-per-call affiliate network is going to speak a completely different language, use different terms, and likely have different priorities than, say, the head of omni-channel at an insurance carrier, right? Who may not even buy affiliate leads and calls and may just be focused on how they can get better tracking for calls that come in from their TV commercials. So I would say step one is identifying your top tranche, your various tranches of ICPs, right? And what problems they may be trying to solve for.
There's so many companies right now who are struggling in a big, big way. They come to us, they try to figure out, what to do in the go to market. And the biggest problem they have and what we uncover is they just don't know what their ICP is and they don't spend any time on it. And I know it's talked about a lot, and sometimes people just say it in our industry all the time, but they really have no freaking idea what their ICP is, and they don't even know how to figure it out. Right. So, walk me through how important that is for you in regards to not only helping your customers to figure that out by utilizing the technology, but more importantly, how do you sell your technology to the right people?
So I'd say one of the most important foundational things that any business can do, whether you're a one-trick pony and you sell one thing and you do it well and you're the best at that, or whether you have a multi-tiered offering that may target a number of different verticals and different types of customers, most important thing is really zeroing in on who your ideal customer profile is. And although, there's a lot of hyperbole around, identify your ICP, figure out who you're talking to. I mean, that really rings true, especially for us when we've come from a place where we have grown not just our quantity of offerings and types of offerings, but the verticals that we're focused on, right? So I'll give you just a one example. Let's just talk about like the insurance industry, right? The priorities of the head of digital at a auto insurance carrier are going to be vastly different than the priorities for someone that's selling auto insurance leads to that insurance carrier, right? And the process that we've gone through that all businesses should really go through of not just saying, here's who we think is going to buy our product, but getting really, really granular and documenting the various archetypes, various buyer personas, what their priorities are, and what the leading solutions are in those spaces, and then being able to, match and mirror your messaging potentially around what others have done well that have gotten success in that space is huge. Um, there's so much information out there. It's easy to get, analysis paralysis, but you have to start somewhere. And so starting with who, not just your business profile, ideal customer profile is, but who the champion or right sort of decision makers within those orgs are and what are important to them is high priority.
So it's interesting, right? Every CEO, every COO, every CRO is now a content creator. I don't know when this shift happened, but social media obviously has changed the game for marketing. And now it's not about just operating and running and executing businesses. It's also about being a thought leader and creating content. You're a COO right now, and I'm a CEO. We're both C-level individuals, but we're on a podcast. So why are we on a podcast, right? So community networking, building referrals is super important. And I know in your space, it is in ours. Why is that? Why did that shift happen? And where do you see it going from here?
Yeah, it starts with some I struggled with early in my career, which was, just simply believing in the power of networking and coming from a place where, I wanted to quantify and measure the value of every potential interaction. It was a struggle for me early in my career to, spend time investing in relationships that I didn't see in the short term could potentially benefit the business, right? And I'll answer your question, starting with a story. I remember I'd had a boss I stopped working for, stayed in touch with the guy, kept him as a mentor, talked a couple times a year. And then fast forward about 8 years later, I called him up. I said, "Hey, remember how I needed new salespeople 6 months ago? Well, my call center lead gen business just went away. Where do I go now?" And, I ended up finding my next, substantial opportunity as a result of a direct referral from that and from him. And that was just someone that there was no value per se in my, novice mind at the time of staying in touch, but I did it. And I think that really opened my eyes to the power of having a network. And that extends well beyond, of course, finding professional opportunities. I think at this point, we're at a place where there's so many solutions out there for anything you could possibly do that you have to be able as a business to be front of mind for your potential customer when a problem emerges, right? When there's an actual need, I should say, for what you do. Um, and creating content, being out there, being a thought leader really differentiates you from, the masses of your competitors. Although to your point, everybody's out there doing something now, right? Uh, Content related and pushing out content. So it's become sort of SOP, right? If you're not doing it, then you're at a disadvantage. If I go and look up, we're a software company, but we buy software, right? And if I go and look up a given brand, I'm going to look at their reviews, I'm going to look at their site, but I'm also going to look at the content that they're making, right? Because it speaks to at times how well connected they are in the industry, and it speaks to, I think, this is sort of a second level of how content production impacts how you're perceived. I think it speaks to the level of connectivity that a business has with their audience. Because if you're constantly putting out content and you're constantly getting feedback from your not just customers, but non-customers, just those that are engaging with your content, you have a pulse on the industry more so than someone who's not doing that. And you just assume if I look at, you, for example, or I look at a given potential partner or vendor, and I see that they're interconnected with thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of businesses, both directly in our strike zone and tertiary to it, I'm going to assume that they have their pulse on, the topics that I'm interested in and that would potentially benefit me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, before it was all about case studies and white papers. I did a post on this on LinkedIn, right? It's all about. I don't get asked that anymore. We say, okay, well, send me your podcast. Let me take a look at your content, and that's having information at the tip of your fingers. That's what this is all about. So it's not just about getting attention. It's about having a network and using building a community online for again business to business
Yeah.
companies. It's
And
pretty unique.
even, you take it to the next level and we get out of the esoteric elements of content generation, you get into basic blocking and tackling as far as, how you're ranking for various search terms. And so it looks up your company along with, what they're looking for a solution for. And then, all of a sudden your podcast where you talked about topic X with some guest that's an expert in it, you're now benefiting from the audience that that person has, the exposure that you're able to get just by associating yourself with that person. So I think it gets well beyond, as I said, the esoteric elements of content generation and branding, and it has just become another tool to get eyeballs and ears towards what you're trying to say and show.
Absolutely. So let's switch gears. You're a COO by day, not a content creator, right? So how do you drive teams? How do you motivate a team? Right now the market is very turbulent in many situations. There's culture that needs to be looked at. There's environment and community that needs to be looked at. There's opportunities, a lot of competition. So we have to retain our employees. Like, how do we find the right teammates and how do we grow them without having them leave after 6 to 12 months. So, what is it that you're focusing on right now to drive success with your teams, and how are you building them?
Yeah, I mean, we're very fortunate here to have a hyper talented team from product development to marketing, business development, and particularly our leadership team as well. When it comes to actual team development, um, and sort of my philosophy on how you do that, how do you find the right people? How do you make them enjoy coming to work? I mean, there's some crazy studies out there about the low percentage of people that actually like their jobs, right? So I'll answer your question in a couple parts. People tend to like to do what they're good at, right? So being able to identify somebody's natural talent, not just what's on their resume, but really identify what a particular employee is really good at. And if you can, I don't want to say build a role, but if you can adjust to to empowering that employee to do what they're best at in a way that benefits the business, you will have a much different employee experience than if they're doing things that maybe they're okay at, but they just don't like to do it.
Right.
We all do things we don't like, hence, do hard things, right?
Yep.
Some people like to do those hard things.
So you have a great team, which is amazing. How do you take them to the next level? How are you getting the most out of them? How are you giving them the most amount of, an environment and a track to run on to have success?
That's the age-old question, right? I had heard long ago, business is the ultimate social experiment. And it's true, You have, I think one of the biggest, most important things that gets lost in a lot of organizations is the team understanding the why behind why decisions are made. Especially, mid-level, entry-level employees at many organizations, get told, here's the job, here's what we're doing, here's the project. Maybe they know about the project, they know about some goals, but they may not truly understand the why, the big picture why about why certain decisions are being made, right? And if you can convey that and create an environment where the why is constantly communicated, whether it's to people that can influence the why or what's being done or not, everyone understanding the big picture why is crucial to all the different parts of the machine, working as they're supposed to. I think understanding people and their psychology and what drives them and what motivates them is crucial. And that, to get more specific on that, understanding what they like to do and what they're really good at. People tend to really like to do the things they're good at, right? I've been told I'm okay at talking. So I'd like to talk with the goal in mind of, finding a solution with a customer, partner, whatever, right? I don't like to do a bunch of spreadsheets and stuff. I'm okay at it. I don't really like to do it, right? And if you can figure out not how to change a role so that people can do what they like, but how to just play to a strength and create a dynamic where your employees are doing things they like to do, they'll invariably end up doing things they're really good at.
Right.
Group mentoring is super important. I think you can do, like, let's look at sales teams as a specific example, right? You can do a ton of one-on-one coaching with your sales team members, but there is no substitute for having group mentoring sessions. If you're listening to recorded phone calls or looking at how email communication is being conducted, because I could have my way of doing it, and maybe the person I'm coaching, they'll just never be good at doing it my way because my way works for me, right? But you put 3, 4 other people in there, 3 or 4 of their peers in there, you create an environment where everyone's open to receiving that feedback and operating with transparency and coming from a place of what can I do better? And you hear 4 or 5 different versions of how you could have handled a given scenario. For a salesperson, particularly a young salesperson, that's invaluable because you may not know yet what's going to work best for you. You need to hear 4 or 5 versions and take those all out on a test drive for your next 100 customer engagements, right? Before you figure out what works for you. Um, I think, being able to create repeatable processes with some amount of branching, we'll call it, for variability is huge. You need to be able to give someone a roadmap, although they need to be able at times to have some flexibility with how they follow that roadmap as it pertains to client communications and such. Put out the best practice, put out the here's how it's worked for others sort of, give them the light, so to speak, so they can get through the darkness. I think that's crucial, but also being open to, someone saying, "Hey, I followed 70, 80% of this. Here's what I did a little bit differently. Um, and it's working." Right. And then,
Got it. Love it.
lastly, especially this day and age, and this is maybe a little bit less popular with the younger generation these days, but hat tip to Ray Dalio for the terminology, but radical transparency is just so important. The ability to be critical with each other, coming from a place of everyone understanding that there is a mutual goal, and that gets back to understanding the why, right? If we have to, deliver some critique to a team member, a peer, or even managing up, right? Everybody needs to be able to receive that critical feedback. And it's tough to create an environment where you can receive critical feedback if you don't first start with everyone coming from a place of understanding the why, right? Here's our goal.
Yeah.
If I see something, if I see something that is happening that's not going to get us to our goal, I need to be empowered to speak on it, and you need to be able to receive that, and vice versa.
Right. Are you guys all in office or are you spread out or remote? How's it work?
We are predominantly in office. So I'm at our headquarters in Los Angeles, Glendale area specifically. We have about 60 or so employees here. We have offices. We recently opened in Toronto, offices in the United Kingdom that handle the majority of our EU business, as well as in Eastern Europe, where we have a good amount of our development and product team. So although we have some remote folks, we are predominantly in office.
Yeah, but even though you're in office, which I think being in office is a lot easier than being remote when it comes to doing these things. I'm a fully remote company, so there's a lot of positives and negatives on both sides. But you're still international, and you're still spread across multiple locations. How do you keep it all together, and how do you institute and understand your people and know them well enough and know their why well enough and be able to build those relationships when offices are spread across the world?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it starts with the top, right? Starts at the top with management having trust in their counterparts in management, and with knowing that, they can have once a week, once every couple weeks, check in with one other manager and know that by the time they check in again later, that things are going to be marched forward. I can speak, specifically about us. I can say that, we have regular meetings with various quantities of employees at various levels. We have a recurring management meeting with all of our C levels and a couple VPs that occurs every 2 weeks. We have an all hands meeting where, regardless of location, time zone, whether you're in office or dialing in on a Google Meet, we have an all hands meeting, which gets back to the team understanding of why. We'll commonly go through what's on our product development roadmap for not just the next month, 2 months, but like the next year. So that folks that maybe they're just in design, or they're in a role that isn't going to be impacted today by something that is not being built for 7, 8 months. We want them to see the vision of the company and the goal, so that they don't they are more, because they are more than just another, part of a machine. So basically, at the risk of having too many meetings, we want to make sure we have enough meetings that everybody's in communication, and we have sort of a structure and a format where we can go over not just what's been done and what's next, but where we can uh, debate and go through some problems. There's, to my previous point about the value of group feedback, that extends well beyond just coaching salespeople. If I have an operational challenge, or someone has some, marketing challenge, they can go discuss it with one person and then one other person. But the value of creating an environment where you could bring those problems to the table with the balance of your leadership team in an efficient fashion and get some quick feedback. You may have someone just pop up that's, you would think, is not even related to a department that would be trying to solve for whatever issue you have, and they have a great idea, right? So I think the value of being able to have management kind of spitball ideas off of each other, being able to bring problems out into the open, or challenges, we should say, out into the open. Uh, Again, operating from a place of, we're all here to solve X, Y, Z, whatever it is. Here's something I'm struggling with, right? Or here's something I could use another set of eyes on.
This is awesome. Well, I know we're close to time here. How do people get a hold of you if they want to hear about Phonexa, and what is the type of customer that you're looking for? Who should be reaching out to you today?
Yeah, you can reach out to me directly, Jeffrey, Jeffrey, at Phonexa.com. That's spelled phone, X-A, Phonexa.com. Or visit our site and look around some of the information there. You could also find me on LinkedIn. As far as who we're looking to collaborate and work with, on the partnership side, it would be anybody that is in any space dealing with businesses that are focused on high volume business to consumer, for the most part, lead and call generation. So whether you're a brand, an insurance carrier, or you're an agency that works with brands like that, or you're more rooted in the performance marketing side of things, and you're at an affiliate network, or just a big publisher with a bunch of landing pages looking for ways on how to monetize that traffic, reach out to us. We take a very bespoke sort of approach to customer and partner engagement. Since we do so much, we tend to lean very heavily into the discovery portion of the process, as we want to keep whatever follow-up conversations we're going to have highly relevant. So reach out to us. We have a big team here. Glad to chat with you and see how we can help your business grow.
Awesome. Well, Jeff, thanks so much for spending some time with us. We're looking forward to have our audience hear these amazing words of wisdom, and have a great day, man.
Thanks, Gabe. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.